So Tucker Carlson traveled to Romania to ask Andrew Tate why is the Ukraine issue the bottom line, is what he said. This is the bottom line issue. It's been made the bottom line issue, and it's clear it's Tucker Carlson's bottom line issue. It's the first story he came out with on Twitter. It's Tate himself says he doesn't like to get political, but he will for this. And so Tucker Carlson's asking for wisdom from Andrew Tate. Why is this issue the bottom line? And Andrew Tate says it's there's no good guys, and he basically it's the U.S. after power and money, or so on and so forth, as usual. It's a lot of stuff I'm sure you've heard before. Tucker Carlson, of course, is supremely impressed, and he says, "Oh, thank you." He says, having seen war. I'm not sure what war he's talking about, but he says, having seen war, anyone who compares this to Churchill and Hitler needs to shut up. And, you're an idiot. Okay. Okay. A lot of people just have no idea where to even begin with this stuff. And I've seen people kind of say, that it's just never been explained to them why we would give, so much money, these weapons, why we're involved and risking escalation with Russia. And it's just never been explained to them. And some of these people are asking in good faith, not as a really dumb question. It's not the same as the people who say, they haven't seen any footage of the war and they don't believe it's real and it's all money laundering. This is true, basically, that nobody has made that great of a case to the American people on this. Just nobody's really explaining it, and I've been surprised by the media's messaging and the government's messaging on this too. And it just doesn't really answer all people's questions. And I think that there are answers there. And I'd say, first off, it's never an emotional thing on who we're going to ally with or who we're going to go to war with. And what it comes down to, the question to ask is it national interest? And what's in the national interest? And how this benefits America. And I'm not too clinical about it, but I think that case should be made and easily can be made. And I think the first thing that you should say, when this is brought up, just foundationally, you could just refer to the Budapest Memorandum, where basically Ukraine is agreeing to, this is an old treaty where Ukraine gives up their nukes basically in exchange for security guarantees. This is from Russia, from the US and Britain, and this guarantees their borders, and that in exchange for that, there's going to be security guarantees. So nobody's going to mess with these guys without us doing something about it. We're going to protect them because they give up their nukes. It's not a bad idea, and by any stretch, and however dissentful you are, I think people can usually agree with a simple thing like maybe people giving up nukes and nuclear proliferation, and something like this just seems like a good deal for everybody if different countries are just kind of turning the nukes in. And I mean, the U.S. should just have people's back. I think if people do that. With Ukraine, we're talking about the third largest nuclear stockpile at the time, and not necessarily that they had all the launch codes and so on and so forth, but it still counts for quite a bit to have that kind of material on hand and to give it up. And so, I mean, the idea with this is if you don't fulfill this, and it's true, it's not like obligatory. And people will say, well, it's non-binding. It gives a commitment. It's a political commitment, but it's not necessarily like a binding thing where there's enforcement. But you can't really enforce the U.S. You can't punish America for not going to war for this treaty. There's nothing that really exists that would even do that. And what's at stake is credibility. And before, people would say that that's a good deal, and you would look at that as a good example for what could be done with nuclear non-proliferation and getting rid of these nukes. So then now it's kind of, you toss that out, and everyone figures there's only going to be one security guarantee going forward. And the U.S. is not going to have your back. And Russia will just invade, and people will just look the other way. So you better have nukes, or you're going to eventually, your nation's probably toast. You're on the chopping block. And the only real guarantee, because you see it works out for Russia, everyone says, well, you can't mess with them because they have nukes, and the other guys gave up their nukes, a lot of them to Russia. I mean, Russia probably had no problem signing that agreement at the time because this was a country under their thumb still, and they figured it would be going forward, which is why, they're moving in now. So, I mean, we have that. It's clear-cut violation of this treaty. That, I mean, Russia is obviously not committed to this thing, but the U.S. still has credibility, and going forward, I mean, we could probably take some other nukes off the street if it comes down to it. I mean, in the future, you don't want a situation where every third world country has nukes, and you're only going to make a World War III even worse for everyone. Like, if you have kids and it could make a very bad world for them. If this is the rules going forward, that just everyone needs to have nukes, and that's the only real guarantee. I think that's a very solid basis for this military support. I mean, it doesn't. It's hard to argue with, in my opinion, on why the U.S. shouldn't do that. And you could figure maybe there are special circumstances here that change things. But you look at you take the Russian arguments, and their goals for the war is demilitarization and denazification. That's the two things they say we're going in there to do. And I mean, the one you figure, the problem is they're just saying NATO is inherently hostile and aggressive in posture to to Russia. I mean, you have to just assume immediately NATO's not what it claims to be, a defensive security alliance with mutual protection. You know, it's built for a future invasion of Russia, and it's just inching closer and expanding, rather than say just an expansion of allied countries who are finding common ground, like between European countries just finding common ground and deciding to band together. And I don't. I think it's an absurd argument. I'm surprised Americans will repeat it, because how many people really just hate Russia and are just gunning for, like, Russians will just say, everyone in the world hates Russians, and they're like racist against Russians, and just for no reason. So they're just persecuted people. People hate them for no reason at all. And I mean, okay, if a Russian might think so, but why would an American really figure that? I don't know how many people before this war really were sitting around who cared that much. Definitely, some people did, but I mean, come on, like, people don't have it out for Russia. And I mean, one of the only, they'll try to say that maybe a certain tribe has it out for them. I don't buy that at all. And those arguments they don't hold up to scrutiny if you really look at it. I mean, demilitarization, you can't just attack your neighbor if he gets a gun because you think it could be used against him in the future, and you figure I might actually break into his house in the future, so it's not good for me if that guy arms himself, so I better just break in now and kill him. And that's the argument where you just say it's NATO expansion, and that constitutes aggression in itself. And if NATO expands and other countries make these treaties together, that's a form of aggression, not just a failure of Russian diplomacy and a failure of Russia to maintain friends. Maybe people just don't want to hang out with them. They don't want to be in their sphere anymore for a reason. I don't see. I mean, I thought of NATO as like a big joke before the war, and everyone else did too. That's how everyone spoke about NATO. And then now Americans will say, well, it's NATO's expansion is aggressive, militaristic, Nazi organization bent on the destruction of Russia. I mean, you can understand where these people are coming from. I mean, it's really make-believe. NATO is getting on its feet now and using a remilitarization just because of Russia. And I mean, what they're really looking at is that if Ukraine did join NATO, Russia they can't get it back. There's no going back after that. Eventually they would want a Eurasian empire, and they want the Soviet Union back. You're not serious if you don't see it that way. Ukraine has rich resources, and World War II is basically fought over it. And if it joins NATO, yeah, it is. Russia just sees that they might need to jump in and prevent that from happening. You could see where they're coming from on that, but it's not. You don't need to entertain it from the other side that much. I mean, bad people have their reasons for different things, but at some point, and then denazification is the even grosser kind of thing where they're saying that, like, there's a Holocaust going on in Ukraine where there's like Nazis and there's like all these ethnic Russians, and they're so hated, and the Nazis are like genociding them already, and they're preparing like a large genocide that the Russians have to go in and stop and denazify the country. This is people find it hard to comprehend, and even for a while people could hardly even figure it out, and now people are kind of there's a certain kind of pro-Russian person who's kind of getting twisted into going along with this. But this is a bizarre thing too. I mean, you can't. These kind of people would argue about like neocons and things like that. That a neocon is basically a person who maybe would say to go to war without regard for the national interest, we'll say, and for more humanitarian reasons. And I that's probably the most clear what a neocon is, and is, or how they see themselves. And but I think it's fair enough to just see the folly in that itself. And that's what, if you're defending these kind of Russian war aims, why have you been criticizing neoconservatives up until now? Where now, even though you recognize that another country is a sovereign country and so on, that you're gonna intervene into their thing, their affairs, and is there a human rights violator? There's other channels to deal with that. If it were the case, I mean, there's no evidence for that. There certainly is evidence that there are neo-Nazis in Ukraine, but it's the thing is, neo-Nazis in Ukraine have rights, and you can't, just like they do in America. Like, you can't just invade America and then just round up skinheads and be like, well, I'm just killing these people because they're no good. And not even the police do that here. And they do that in Russia maybe, but I mean, imagine if like an Antifa army had tanks and stuff and was like parked in like the South, and if you have a Confederate flag tattoo or something, you're a Nazi, they have checkpoints, and this is literally what they do. And with the battle with Mariupol, I mean, the Russians in their own propaganda, they're showing they're like checking Ukrainians for tattoos. If they have nationalist tattoos or like military tattoos, then they're a Nazi, and they're just bragging that they're killing these people, because like that's just a good thing to do, to just go in and kill every Nazi in the country. And you could just invade a country if there's a presence of Nazi. It's like the Putin doctrine is like, it's like the Bush doctrine, where if there's terrorists in the country, then you go in. If the government, if the Taliban doesn't want to hand over the terrorists, you go in anyway. If Saddam doesn't cooperate, you go in. There's terrorists there, so you go. Is the Bush doctrine. It was done in Syria as well. ISIS is there. Assad can't deal with it. Obama went in as well. It's a Bush doctrine kind of neoconservative. But you're just gonna say, if there's neo-Nazis there, if there's that's a term that people throw around willy-nilly, and any nationalist group they're gonna say is a Nazi. I mean, you could just say someone's a Nazi and just kill them. In the West, you have rights. You have certain rights to have like messed up opinions and things. And you could believe different things, and you still have rights. It doesn't matter if I mean, as far as if there's Nazis in the military in Ukraine, at this point every Ukrainian has a duty to fight for Ukraine, and that includes neo-Nazis. And I mean, that's just, I mean, you, you can't, obviously those people are in danger from the Russian army. And that's an emotional appeal. I mean, Tucker Carlson will say you're an idiot if you think it's you know, Churchill and Hitler, but that's all that the Russians do. And their whole thing is a mythology of World War II, and they celebrate all the stuff, and they celebrate Joseph Stalin and how they're the greatest country, and they did all of World War II, and how that's why they're the good guys. And now they're fighting the Nazis again. Whoop-de-woo. I mean, this is the people with that attitude. It's just, instead of Churchill, it's Stalin, but they like Stalin way more than Churchill. But they still are like it's like a World War II thing. And so to just say there's no good guys with this, there's no good guys, there's no bad guys, and if you think it's Churchill and Hitler, I mean, that's what the side that these people support do say. It's just that they think that Churchill is the other. They think that Putin is like Churchill. I mean, the stuff is really bizarre. I don't think these arguments hold up. I think because that the aid is working, we should just keep going with it. And you see how I think in the beginning, actually, Brandon did very well, and like I think he maybe still is with it, and definitely by where, I mean, since Trump got the javelins in, and after that you could see how the Ukrainians were able to use them very well. Then it was smart that with, Brandon is incrementally upping the aid, because you want to see if people can use it. If at the beginning it just looked like Ukraine is going to get smoked like completely, like there wouldn't be that much point. I mean, what could we say at that point? If Russia just went like right to Lviv and just took the whole country over, we'd have nothing to really say. We'd have nowhere to drop weapons off. But as it is, everything, the lines are holding, and I mean, they're actually being pushed east now, where, I mean, but you can see where, okay, they could use the javelins, so then you hook them up with better artillery systems, get them the HIMARS systems, the rocket artillery, and so on and so forth, and go from there and just build everything, because we wouldn't want everything to just go to waste. But as it turns out, we are getting a good bang for the buck. Like, you can't say that we're just blowing all this money for nothing and just being money laundered and so on and so forth. It's about 20 cents on average per taxpayer is driving this whole war effort per day. And it's really money well spent if you figure that Russia has been an enemy for a very long time and has been driving our defense budget for a very long time. And we'd only have to just spend more money if they took over, like, Ukraine, had this breadbasket, and we're building this like new Soviet Union. And I mean, we'd just be cranking up military spending through the roof. As it turned out, if we're able to kind of knock these guys out, significantly degrade and Russia, and hopefully just destroy, but that's a good deal. You haven't had any American troops involved in this. That's the most expensive part of a war, is actually just having the troops. It's putting boots on the ground is a huge, more than the bombs and things like that, is going to be like the veterans benefits. And you could see that and say how we handled ISIS, where they're like bringing in these like Kurdish Maoists and stuff like that. and just using the U.S. Air support, but not really putting the troops in. And so it's a huge bargain if we're able to just use these weapons, but a Ukrainian can fire them. A lot of the Ukrainian can fire them just as good as a U.S. soldier. And I mean, people argue that because the woke military, that the Ukrainian can fire it off even better. And well, I mean, that's great. The point is, it's kind of, they can do it, so why not? It would just be really dumb at this point to give up now and say, oh, this is crazy, let's just sue for peace and let Russia make a new Soviet Union. And so when we're beating them back for very little, and I think that it would be smart, and we're a little past the time to just start upping the whole military aid with all that. I'll get to that another time. But one thing I do think is funny is that Andrew Tate says that we should thank Putin for curing COVID or something. And he says it like it's like a funny thing, and whatever the implications that whatever the truth to that there you think there is. I mean, okay, so what? We could just embrace that we have a war, because it's better than that. It's better than what we've been doing, and it's good to just have a national project like this that people can get involved with in whatever capacity. At the very least, I mean, I just say, just don't complain when people try to get you agitated, or try to, say all this nonsense about enemy countries like they're somehow better, and that we can't beat these like these countries. Absolutely we can. Like, I don't know, I'd say we should do it. We don't really need to listen to people who say we can't. There's no real argument to the contrary. Like, you should be able to prove like that we're not doing the right, and it's just with total nonsense like NATO expansion and things like that. And frankly, you can kind of just make an emotional argument with this whole war. I mean, if you want, you just say that Russia invaded another country, and they'd ought to prove why, if they had good reason to do it. They do not. Like, just in general, you just assume that the guy defending his own country is like the good guy, and just you say, oh well, no, he's the aggressor because NATO expansion. It's the most bizarre thing. A lot of these like Southerners love anecdotes and stuff, like, well, like, why are you fighting? Like, oh, because you're down here, and so and then they'll give every crazy reason why Russia should just be like this conquering Eurasian horde or of some sort, like why they should just be blazing across the steppe and doing. I mean, it's really what they want to see for whatever reason. If you look at the arguments, I mean, I don't think their arguments are very good. I think just in general, and as far as you just say there's no good guys, I do just kind of assume that America is the good guys. And I would say that in this case, it's, the Ukrainians are the good guys, and we have a great ally. I hope we keep giving them more weapons and more money, because these Russians are no good. Trying to say that you should just invade your neighbor, demilitarize and denazify. these are not good reasons. Other people make up their own reasons, or they'll just say, "Well, Putin was lying. He had to say that," as if it's a good thing to just lie your country into a war. Like he should have just said they had WMDs or something. But anything Putin does, they'll like excuse as like he's like a mastermind, or like he's doing the same stuff that Dick Cheney does, but they think it's like based because it's because he doesn't speak English. Anyhow, that's it for the Budapest Memorandum. I'm out.